All right, fantastic. Thank you all for coming. My name is Ross Bochne. This is Wearable Technology as Art for Countersurveillance, Cinemaveillance, and Sousveillance. So my website is rehumanizing.us, as you can see, and this presentation is on my blog, and all the links are here, so you can go and check that out. Some of these links have extensive pages of links, so lots more to find out. I'll tell you a little bit about my blog and what really interests me. And rehumanizing.us is the name of my blog. I came up with that because I'm really interested in the etymology of certain words that have become dehumanized in pop culture. And when people hear these words, they think the opposite of humanity. They feel that these words are removed from humanity, and the intentions behind these words originally had very humanistic concepts. These words or concepts include technology, cybernetics, cyborg, and robot. And today I'm going to talk about some projects, and I'm also going to talk about the etymology of technology and how it relates. I'm going to go into that more extensively later on, but just to give you a brief overview, what really sparks my research about technology and ways that we could think about technology are Plato's writings. He deals with the word techne, and he deals with the word logos. And different philosophers deal with these concepts. And the way that Plato deals with them is he talks about techne as a craft or a skill that has a purpose or goal, an outcome. It's associated with a practitioner, and that practitioner can give an account of the steps taken by this skill as they relate to the outcome. So, for example, somebody who is performing some kind of a task, but they don't know how that task, how those steps really, they get some sort of result, but they don't really know how they got to that result. That wouldn't be classified as a technique by Plato. And logos is an argument in rhetoric, and that account that I was talking about in techne could be thought of as logos. It's also a way of relating symbols to what they represent. So logos, in that sense, is already part of techne. So to jump into the projects, I'm going to talk about counter-surveillance projects that people are doing, Cinemaveillance and Sousveillance projects. So to begin with the counter-surveillance projects, the first group of projects is too much information. So overexposing human-viewed cameras would be let's see how well this works. Okay, this doesn't move super fast. So I'll just probably give you a summary of these projects and not go to all of the links here. Okay, so what this person is doing is confusing a visible, what I call a human-viewed camera. So I'm distinguishing between what I call human-viewed cameras and machine-viewed cameras. So a human-viewed camera is something where there's a human operator who's watching the camera, and a machine-viewed camera is computer vision. CV is another word, is an acronym for computer vision, and also things like facial recognition, automatic facial recognition. So in this project, somebody's taking a mesh suit and they added all of these cards to it. So they completely tiled the suit with it. So what happens is, for some reason, it makes the wearer glitch out on the human-viewed camera. So dazzling is a reference to overwhelming a visual system. This can be done using visible light, such as a flash. So this project utilizes a light sensor that senses when somebody's taking a photograph, and it acts like a slave flash, and it instantly responds with another flash. An example that they give is kind of like an anti-paparazzi project. So that flash overwhelms the camera's visual system, and you don't end up with an image of the person's face at all when you take a flash photo of them. Another way of doing this is through lasers. People have experimented with shining lasers directly at cameras. And all of these projects are, what you might call amateur projects. They're not professional products of any kind, even though the military does have dazzling systems utilizing lasers that cause temporary disorientation, so that they can be overwhelmed. Another way of doing this is through infrared light. So cameras usually pick up on infrared LEDs. If you point a TV remote or a camera remote at a video camera, you'll notice the formerly invisible LED light will show up white. So this is utilizing LEDs, infrared LEDs that are in a hat that totally blow out the image of the person's face. People have done this with hoodies as well. So CV Dazzler is a series of projects. So the CV might just be CV Dazzle. Maybe it's not CV Dazzler, but let's check it out. Yeah, cvdazzle.com. So one of the main projects here is, perhaps I should switch my mic to this side of my body. So looking over here a lot. Okay. So this utilizes makeup and hairstyling. So all of these things will throw off automatic facial recognition. And then in references, there's also like Julian Mayer's tutorial and this makeup tutorial are videos where they draw lines and do the makeup and the hair. The Android project by Stevie Dazzle, what it does is it allows you to take photos of people, and it will add just a couple of markers. It's not as extreme as the makeup and hair tutorial. So if you want to take a photo of somebody's face and put it online, the face will still be recognizable to human viewers, but it will the additional markers will throw off automatic facial identification. So that's a way to increase anonymity while still making something that's recognizable by humans. So the next category is stealth. So perhaps the most obvious way of avoiding video surveillance is to avoid the cameras altogether. And I'm going to talk about the surveillance camera players. They're performance artists, and they also have a map of all of the public surveillance cameras. I don't know when this was last updated, but they've made a list of public surveillance cameras in many major U.S. cities. I think they started in New York, and they also provide instructions on how to make your own maps. Now, automating this, I think there might be some projects where people are combining the database of where the cameras are along with GPS so that you can automatically plot a route from one place to another where it will route you around those cameras. And if you guys have any additions to any of these projects, just come along, leave a reply. It's moderated, so I'll check this and or just let me know at the con, and I'll add the information that you have to the site so we can share it around. So I said hiding from night vision. It's more hiding from heat vision. There's a lot of different types of night vision. So I'm not talking about infrared night vision in this particular instance. I believe in terms of the stealthware, they do a couple of interesting projects. So the anti-drone hoodie is basically an aluminized shrug. So it stops. It's a hoodie, but it stops around the midriff, And so there's a good example. Maybe that is infrared. I need to look into that. Could be. Is there a thermal imaging? Like they do have a false color image, so that's why I think that it is thermal. If all of their imagery was just grayscale, then I would be more inclined to think that it was infrared. But yeah, I think it is. It is thermal imaging. And so, part of this idea of art is people aren't trying to carry out these projects because they're really trying to hide from, let's say this project isn't really trying to completely hide somebody from this type of imaging, because obviously they only made it go halfway down the torso. So one of these ideas, another idea that I didn't mention as part of Techne is it has a product that is apart from the actual act or the actual activity. So if you were going to engage in something that is purely conceptual, that it's not, it's really done for its own sake, that might not be considered a techne by Plato, and therefore would fall more into art versus what I'm creating this ancient etymology of the term technology. Fooling biometric tracking. So as part of DNA spoofing, there's a video where two people are sitting next to each other. One chews a piece of gum, and then the other person takes the gum and puts it in their mouth. So I'll spare you from watching that. And it also involves like taking a hairbrush and basically, giving that DNA so that somebody, would carry that around and fool DNA tracking. So RF shielding, there's actually a lot of interest commercially. Things that shield, for example, RFID. I'm running off of battery power, but I thought I have a pretty good battery life, so I think we might have to go through the rigmarole again, because I couldn't find a place to plug in my netbook back here. But the fact that my computer is rebooting indicates that it's not battery. That I got a blue screen, so whatever. We'll see what happens. Do you think that has? Well, good, because I'm tired of updates. I'm tired of Java updates. I'm tired of Flash updates because they don't help. All right. Oh yeah, so I was talking about RF shielding, and anyway, like I said, this whole talk and all the links are available on rehumanizing.us. So RF shielding, there's a cell phone case that basically blocks any of the radio signals from getting out. Same thing with RFID blocking wallets. People are making their own. LessEMF.com is a really interesting website for materials. They have metallized textiles, and they also have a lot of metallized threads. So if you're doing, if you're making wearable like push buttons, and you need some sort of conductive textile, that's a great source for it. And lots of shielding options, RF blocking wall paint, coverings for windows, lessemf.com. This system has recovered from a serious error. Well, at least it didn't make me wait that long. So let's try to pull this back up. While we're doing that, getting to sneaking by motion sensors. So, you know, of course, Hollywood loves playing with, you know, different wow. I think I have recovered from a serious. Fantastic. Oh yeah, so Mythbusters took on several of these systems. They covered Tory and Mud, a la Predator. They found that that and also neoprene suit, like they used in sneakers. The neoprene worked pretty well for a little while, but it insulated Tory so much that he got hot inside the wetsuit, and eventually the heat transferred through, and so they weren't able to fool thermal imaging. They used thermal imaging to get a sense of his chances against these sensors. But they did find that holding up a bed sheet did absorb the ultrasound in such a way that they were able to move through the room by holding up a bed sheet. Also moving really slowly. But wearing a fursuit does not work in terms of absorbing the sound. They also took some thick glass and utilizing the thermal imaging. When they held up the thick glass, they noticed that the camera could not see through it, but they found it impractical to carry a body-sized sheet of thick glass. But what they did was, inside their test room, they came in through a duct, and they had an arm, and they basically had a piece of glass that was big enough to hang in front of the sensor, and they just hung it in front of the sensor, and that worked. Censorship as naughtiness. So some of you may be familiar with Jimmy Kimmel's unnecessary censorship. Taking certain words and bleeping them out, and also scrambling certain gestures because of the way that auditory and visual censorship has been used. People just assume that whatever is being bleeped or blurred out should not have, is not suitable for the FCC, even though it is. And bubble porn, which is really interesting, taking a non-naughty photo and basically putting a colored mask over the whole image and then selectively revealing circles, like portions of the image that are very sexually suggestive, and then they remove the mask and it's innocuous. Also, here's a link to some things about bogus anti-surveillance groups. Sometimes people exploit people's fears and just create bogus devices and try to sell things that don't work. Sousveillance is, it means watching from below, whereas surveillance means watching from above. Sousveillance means watching from below. So this has relationships as to where cameras are being placed, who has access to the cameras, who are using these cameras. For things regarding accountability to the law, community and humanity in general. So part of this would be the ubiquity of cameras, video cameras, and many devices, and also the ability to stream video. And once that video is streamed, it can be viewed live, and it can also be archived. And there used to be along with like down here, like streaming media, there used to be an issue where if you were documenting, let's say police brutality or other human or civil rights violations, that if you were documenting these things on film, that if the camera was either taken from you or the back of the camera was opened and overexposed the film, well, there goes your evidence right there. So there's, combine that with, that doesn't happen because of streaming. So when people can view things live, things are archived, and also once the file is archived, it can be mirrored. People can mirror links and also download and re-upload videos as well. So that's one interpretation of watching the watchers. Another interpretation of watching the watchers is, if you think of police being the watchers, police are watching police. Police are also videotaping, while protesters are videotaping police. Police are also videotaping the protesters. And police are also videotaping themselves. Things like dash cams, the recent killing in Albuquerque. So the video was released. So police shot a homeless man, killed him, and the police were shooting video. And, you know, even the fact that was documented, you know, the police chief still looks at that video and says, well, can't you see, you know, these officers were justified in you know, using deadly force. Whereas, you know, human rights lawyers look at the same footage and say, wow, I've never seen a murder documented quite this way before. So what that proves is that interpretation of the same footage is really, it's not just about gathering footage. Basically, it's about how you interpret the footage as well. And it's also, I think it's, you know, things like dash cams or, you know, soldiers wearing cameras or police wearing cameras. You know, if they're wearing these things in a public space, I think that does have benefits. You know, as long as they're not like sneaking cameras into private spaces, I think that is, there is potential to cut down on misbehavior on both sides, both by authority figures and by those that they're trying to exert their authority over. And you know, if it's you know, if somebody you know, attacks police, then you know, you view the footage, and like I said, it's about how you interpret the footage. You know, people shouldn't be able to do that either, and also hopefully keeps the authority figures you know, following the law as well. So citizen cameras, what I mean by whistleblowers and their protection / ACEs is sort of like a dead man's switch where, you know, for example, Snowden has a lot of information, and some of that information is being used as an ACE. So basically, if something happens to him, then that information will, by other people, it will be automatically released. There's other ways of automating this process. You know, things like where you set something up so that you have to check in, you have to log in with your password, you know, every so often. So that verifies that you are free, and if you know something happens where you can't log in, then you know, information can be released. So Sousveillance is a project that I did at Barcamp LA. Barcamp is a non-con or unconference where it's totally user-generated content. So people say, "Oh, I want to give a talk about making the ultimate sandwich," and there's a whole bunch of like butcher paper taped to the wall, and a bunch of rooms, and a bunch of time blocks, and people go up and say, "This is what I want to give a talk on." So bar camps are a response to food camps. So Sousveillance is a project that involved wearable video. So I had a head-mounted video camera which was sending its feed to a video monitor that I was wearing around my neck. So I was watching a monitor that had the words for karaoke, and I was singing along, I think the heart-shaped box, and the audience was watching me, and they were also watching themselves, because what I was seeing was being shown to them on the monitor around my neck. Also, you know, this relates to social media and censorship. Turkey trying to shut down Twitter. I'll get back to that in a second. Streaming media, like I said, you know, permits people to view live situations that are happening at actions or whatever it is from around the world, and then that footage can also be uploaded in Nerd. Make sure that you know that footage stays alive and up at least somewhere. It's worth mentioning social media for organizing. So sharing content and links, that could be everything from, oh, look at this piece of alternative news media, I'm going to share a link with you, you know, using things like Facebook to do that. And also literally organizing protests, such as was used in the Arab Spring. I think, has anyone heard about rebels in Libya utilizing Twitter? If I recall correctly, they were utilizing Twitter to basically send coordinates, basically calling in airstrikes over Twitter. I'll have to look into that. So acknowledging the watchers with performance art. So Wikipedia, not my favorite source of things, but if you look up Sousveillance on Wikipedia, or actually if you look up Sousveillance, or you look up the term surveillance art, I'm just going to quickly scroll down and just show you how much content is on this page. So there's lots to check out, and also lots of references. So I actually highly recommend this page. Talking about the different forms of sousveillance. Sousveillance is a term that Steve Mann created. So this is one of his early wearable computing prototypes. So he's got it down to basically even less than the look of Google Glass. He has optics, so beam splitters that are built into a pair of regular glasses, so you can't even really tell. He's since miniaturized all of this as well. What he started doing, the way that he got into wearable computing is he was doing light painting He's one of the pioneers of light painting. I think he was inspired by William Eggleston, if I'm correct, who is an imaging pioneer at MIT, who pioneered the use of high-speed flash for freezing motion, inspired Steve Mann to walk around with these flash. It was like it was a flash handle that he was using for photography, but then he started into the handle. He started building buttons, and he started using them as a keyer. So he got really interested in using multiple key combinations on this keyer to enter text, and he would use, I think he would use APRS. It was some kind of radio system to send out video and also text. And yeah, it was one of the things he was doing. So one of his projects, is a kind of a reverse panopticon. So the idea of the panopticon is in a prison where you have a centrally located tower that has tinted windows all the way around, and prison cells surrounding that. The idea is that you might be watched, you might be being watched, but you never know if you're being watched. So the idea is that you could control people's behavior because they might be watched, but they don't know when it's happening. Maybe camera is an idea where he got a whole bunch of people together with these tinted domes that are much like camera domes. So they put these domes on T-shirts, they put them on backpacks, and some of them had cameras in them, some of them didn't. Glogging, recording and streaming images and video, like a gargoyle from Snow Crash. One of his projects is called My Manager. It's a way of dealing with bureaucracy. So, for example, he has a body-worn camera. So he would walk into, let's say, a store that has these camera domes, and back before he really miniaturized the cameras, actually what he would do is, even when he did have miniaturized cameras, what he would do is he would walk in with like a shoulder-sized camcorder just as a prop, and he would pretend to start videotaping in the store. And so people would, security would come and say, you're going to have to stop shooting video in here. And he would say, well, why? You guys are videotaping me. Why can't I videotape you? And the theme of the responses that he was getting is, well, I'm just following orders. I can't turn off these cameras because my manager will not allow me to. So Steve, being a performance artist, one of the things that he did was, because his wearable computer was connected to the net, he would actually intentionally ask people to tell him what to do. so that he could say, well, I can't turn off my camera because my manager won't allow me. And so throwing the same sort of rhetoric back at the system. Also, he has all these projects are documented in his book entitled Cyborg. I'm going to try to bring that with me tomorrow. So he has all of this paperwork so that when people ask him, oh, well, can you delete me from that video you just took of me? He says, okay, but you're going to have to fill out this form first. And then it has all this legalese saying like, you know, I accept responsibility for what may happen when this information is deleted. And it basically just scared people. The idea was to scare people off to not wanting to sign it and you know, deal with the legal consequences. So that brings me to Cinemaveillance. I'm going to fly through this idea because I'm going to show you a little bit more about what Plato says, and then I'll go back into Cinemaveillance because I can show you a demonstration. So, Cinemaveillance is a word that I created in response to the fact that surveillance video doesn't really have much of a cinematic aesthetic. So I wondered, well, you know, there's a lot of camera tethering going on, and I could point you towards a lot of different hardware and software for doing that. And the idea is, you know, this camera could be set up, let's say, at a, you know, I could be sitting at a table at an outdoor cafe. I'm really interested in street photography. So the camera could be sitting either on the table, or it could be inside of a bag. And through wired or wireless control of the camera, I could actually achieve some really cinematic and achieve the level of artistic control that, as a photographer and videographer, that I'm interested in gathering. This means control over the normal things such as shutter speed and exposure, but also a lot of these programs extend the functionality of what my camera is capable of doing. So, for example, this is a Nikon D5200. This camera can already do time-lapse, which is one of the features that's available through camera tethering. But it also allows focus stacking. So I have a program, I have about 3 different programs on my wireless, my mobile device, and I have a dongle, it's a Wi-Fi dongle, and this particular dongle is the WU-1A, and there's also a WU-1B for other camera models. What it allows me to do is control, basically the camera creates a server, and then I'm logging into the server with the client, and the client is going to control the camera functions. So for my demo, I'm going to be using a wired tether and a open source program called Digicam Control. There's some others that I'm evaluating. One is called Control My Nikon, which is for stills. Another one is Videographer Pro, which is made by Control My Nikon. And it's more for controlling video. It allows you to create visualizations. What these visualizations can do is do things like color an area in a video frame that's in focus. It could also color, and it's optional. You can turn on a feature that will color underexposed areas, overexposed areas, and one of the start recording, stop recording, live histograms. One of the things that's great about camera tethering for filmmaking is it plays off of the old idea of a video tap. So what that was is, if you have a film camera, what they would do is they would take a video camera and shoot it down the eyepiece, and then they would take the feed from that video camera and they would show it on a monitor. So what you could do is you could have multiple crew members, director of photography, focus puller, could all have their own monitors. And now with things like mobile devices, including tablets, you can have a director that's sitting in front of a big monitor, and then you can have the person who's in charge of pulling focus. They can have their own monitor. This utilizes networking. And so some of these programs are meant to run on, let's say, a PC. So I have a netbook here, and I have another netbook that I'm doing a case mod for. So I'm building that into a ruggedized plastic videotape case from an old big videotape. And so when you open the case, it has a monitor. It has the monitor from the netbook. But also, even with the case closed, I'm extending the ports of the motherboard through ribbon cables out to the outside of the case. And what I plan on doing is, some of these programs have built-in network control, so that once you have the main tethered computer, you could get that networked, and then you could use a smaller device. So through features that are built in, or through using a virtual private network, you could, instead of having to utilize the original screen, you could just use a small little screen. So yeah, basically the screen is as big as you want, and then you can keep that ruggedized case mod closed and attached to a robot, for example, which is another project I'll explain a little later. So some of these programs offer interesting ways of triggering the shutter. Some of them have built-in motion triggering, so that if you're doing some wildlife photography, when something comes into the frame, you can set the threshold and say when this many pixels change contrast, fire the shutter. Lots of other things that you can do. Sound triggering. Triggering based on light. Triggering based on other sensors. Some of the applications that I'm really interested in using this for is, going back to Eggleston, high-speed photography. So that's another fantastic use for it. Another fantastic use for it is, as a photographer, I do things where I'll have a tank of water set up and I will drip paint, and I will photograph the way that the paint diffuses, make these jellyfish looking images, and what remote triggering will allow me to do is see what the camera sees, and then I could be over wherever I need to be manipulating the paint, and then I could also be triggering. This would work with like an infrared remote control, but then again, there's the possibility, depending on the camera, of actually picking up the light from the infrared diode. So these are other ways of triggering the camera. So other things that I want to do with this, focus stacking, time lapse, HDR photography, high dynamic range photography, is a form of stacking where you're taking multiple images at different exposure levels, but maintaining the aperture setting. And what you're able to do is take a normally exposed image, and when I do HDR photography with this camera, I have, when I release the shutter, it takes 3 images. One at what it determines to be the average exposure. It takes another one that's 3 stops underexposed and 3 stops overexposed. So there you start to, that's where you get the high dynamic range. Now, when you're doing sheet film, what Ansel Adams would do is he would be, because he would expose in one image instead of a roll of images, what he could do is he could note the exposure of the shadows. So he used what's called the zone system. So he would say, okay, for, let's say, 10 different zones of exposure, here's where I want to place the middle gray. So maybe he would, if he was taking a portrait, he did a lot of landscape photography, but let's say he was taking a portrait, he could choose to say, oh, well, I want a certain skin tone to show up as a certain gray level in my black and white image. He would expose for getting detail in the shadows, and then instead of processing the film normally, he could change the processing times for each individual sheet of film. So what he could do is, because he works with a negative, once you get a certain amount of detail in what ends up being the shadows, which is the lightest portion of film, what he could do is he could take, it's called exposing for the shadows, printing for the highlights. He could keep pushing the development of a particular frame of film, and he could keep exposing that. And so, actually, what printing for the highlights refers to is the processing, not the actual printing. So, you could keep, I think what it does is keeps removing silver halide from the film, so it makes it darker. So I'm not going to try to remember what exactly how this works, but it's called the zone system. That's essentially what you're doing digitally. I'm interested in doing panoramas, gigapans. So a gigapan is, rather than just taking image, 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 what you're doing is actually utilizing a motorized pan and tilt head. And so you're taking, you could zoom in, because you're taking multiple images and you're going to be stitching them together later, you could zoom in to something and take an image and take another image and keep taking these images in a row, and then you could move on to the next row and take many, many, many photos. And, you know, with this camera, it would be 24 megapixels per image. So when you start stitching those together, you could create these gigapan images, and you could present them like zoomed back. But what you could do is you, through either printing really large images or through a digital viewer, you can allow somebody to take a scene and let them keep zooming in at very high resolution. And there's a way of doing this for macro photography as well. So I was looking at my 40-inch monitor, and somebody had done, my friend Bob calls this pico pen. So it's a macro image, and you could do the same kind of thing with macro photography. And so I was looking at a surface mount resistor, which, I mean, if it's, you know, it's smaller than the profile of a pencil eraser. I was looking at it about this big in such detail that you could see, you know, how good each solder joint is, and you could see the oxidation of each tiny little soldering joint. And also, what I'm going to do is utilize a CMU-CAM 5. The CMU-CAM is a project where it basically does built-in image processing on a board. So the board is maybe $40, and it has a camera on it. CMU-CAM 5, also known as the Pixie, P-I-X-Y, and Piximon, P-I-X-Y-M-O-N, is the software that you could control the Pixie with. But most searches for Piximon still give you Pokemon. So not a lot of you know, search hits on Piximon just yet, because they just people just started receiving them from the Kickstarter about people started receiving them about 2 weeks ago. So a project that I'm going to be doing is playing off the the CMU-Cam5's ability to automatically control servos. So what you could do is you could take this, take the Pixie, and you can order a pan and tilt module with 2 servos, and the servos plug right into the Pixie. And it has a button, and you hold a color in front of the camera, you press the button down, and it programs that color and has a RGB LED that will turn the color that you think you just programmed into it. And then when you move that color around, it's called color blob tracking. With the pan and tilt setup, it will automatically follow that colored object. So that's fine if you're using a very lightweight camera, but to control something like this, I'm going to have to balance it. I'm going to have to use high torque servos. And what I'm going to do with it is put it on the end of a painter's pole. And there's a really great painter's pole that has a button. So it's a telescoping painter's pole. So you hold the pole in one hand, and then you press this button, and as you move the button, it extends, it telescopes between the button section and the other part of the pole, and then another section on the other side of the button. So what I'm going to do is by moving this the pole in and out, I'm going to replicate camera moves like jib moves, or crane moves, or dolly moves, performing the course work, the course adjustment of the camera work, and then what the automatic pan and tilt head will be doing is it will be automatically tracking a subject to make sure that I keep the subject in frame. So I can perform the moves of a like 2-person or more video crew with the portability of handheld camera or body-worn camera, but allowing you to do the kinds of camera moves that you would need, like more traditional studio gear to accomplish. So I'm really excited about like doing like crowd pans, or looking around like a doorway, and then I'm gonna because it's a painter's pole, it naturally adapts to paint rollers. So I'm going to utilize the bearing on the paint roller to underhang or undersling the camera, so that what happens is as you move the pole up and down, the camera will automatically stay level. So you don't have to adjust that through cables or anything. And I'm working on that for Ingenuity Fest. So I've done a lot of wearable computing projects, and you know, some of the work that I do illustrates what the true meaning of cyborg is. The true meaning of cyborg is unconscious homeostatic processes that are being assisted from outside the system. That's all it means. So if you're seeking to relax, and you're utilizing binaural beats, or you're utilizing brainwave entrainment through flashes flashes of light that induce certain brainwave patterns, you are becoming a cyborg, because from outside of your own homeostasis, you are unconsciously you're performing this assistance, or this bringing in this information in an unconscious way. Now there's a project that somebody created. It has a little screen, and it's hooked up to a temperature and humidity sensor, and it has a speech module on it. And on the screen, it displays the temperature and it displays the humidity. And the speech module also says temperature 75, humidity 77, temperature 75, humidity 77. And this particular project spits out the sensor readings constantly. So if you were to have this kind of system built into a wearable computer, what that would do is it would constantly impinge upon your consciousness. And it would actually take away from your ability to concentrate on other things. It would task your consciousness. If you have a wearable computer that's giving you, like, let's say you have sensors, and you're about to step into traffic because you're reading your email, and it has sensors that are designed to warn you that, oh, step back onto the curb. If it utilized text to say, stop, get back onto the curb, that is still utilizing, precious computational, neurocomputational time that you require, or tasks your left brain to interpret these linguistic messages, and then you're taking these symbols and you're figuring out, what does that represent? And you could be run over by a bus by then. So that would not be cyborg. I know that a lot of people think of wearable computing as de facto turning people into cyborgs. But the deciding factor is it utilizing unconscious processes, or is it utilizing conscious processes? Is it forcing your consciousness to be involved in the processing, or is it freeing your consciousness up to think, create, feel, and explore? And this message, dear Ross, thank you for your message and for your interest in humanizing, and more especially for the humanizing aspects of the cyborg concept, Professor Manfred Clynes. Manfred Clynes is the man that conceptualized cyborg back in 1960. So, this is partially what I do with cyborg, talking about Plato and cybernetics, and Kybernetes, the ship of state metaphor, the tripartite soul, and this is information that I've given at the International Alchemy Conference, the Institute of Noetic Sciences. So this is why I started Rehumanizing.us, and that's why I called it that. So, talking about wearable computing, and I'm going to be putting more images of these wearable computing prototypes that I've created on my site. But, one way that we could, we could relate things that are wearable is to weaving, because Plato considered weaving a technique. This is a summary. So this relates technique to weaving, and what the information that this summarizes is I'll show you. So on the etymology of technology, and you could, if you go to this link right here, it takes you to the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. So Richard Perry talks about how Plato speaks of technique, and also how Plato speaks of logos. So there's two ways of saying summarizing Plato's view on technique. So Richard Perry, speaking of Plato, says, technique investigates the nature of the thing it cares for and the cause of what it does, and has an account to give of each of them. The context shows that what it cares for has an account to give, which is the cause of its actions. So that account that he's talking about, where the practitioner can talk about what those actions are, what the different steps and the causes of them, and why they do them, that account could be thought of as the logos, what I call the logos of a technique. So another way of summarizing what Plato says is this is just, you could imagine ellipses between each of these statements. Technique is a practical craft or art knowledge, also a skill. So we could think of technique being related to craft or skill or a design. If you want to look at the difference between art and craft, often the distinction that's made is that a craft is creating some kind of a practical object, whether you're weaving a basket or you're making textile, you're making clothes. And art, it would be more along some of the projects that I showed you, where it doesn't have necessarily a product that is apart from what it's doing. Sometimes the product is just the exercise itself. This is found in conceptual art, which a lot of these projects that I showed you are conceptual art and performance art. Some of the things are actually trying to, yes, let's solve this problem, like the RFID blocking wallet. But things like the anti-drone hoodie are just saying, well, I'm making this because of the idea, but I don't expect to actually totally hide somebody from this type of thermal imaging. And it's associated with an activity, like I said, a practitioner. So the idea of the practitioner, there's a person doing this activity. So, you know, this notion where people talk about humanity as it relates to technology, or you know, how does technology affect humanity is a sort of dichotomy that I see constantly being raised. When you look at techne, techne is about a practitioner. So you can't have a techne without that person performing that action. So in that way, humanity is integral to techne. So, and the logos of a techne, or techne logos, where we get technique, we get technology. When you hear the word technique, a lot of people think about a practitioner. But when a lot of people hear the word technology, usually they're thinking of objects or processes or tools, but they're sort of divorcing the person who is performing this from that action or that process or that product in their own mind. And that's what rehumanizing.s is all about. It's saying there's no dichotomy between humanity and technology. We are technology, and there is no technology without us. And there's a goal. Like I said, frequently identified with a result separate from the activity of the craft. So what a weaver is doing is a weaver is taking thread, but there's another way of saying that. But basically, what they're doing is they're taking thread and they're interlocking the thread in order to create a textile. They're basically taking something that's one-dimensional, turning it into a two-dimensional object, which would be a textile, and then what garments are is, if we just had if we just wore a sheet, like a sandwich board, we had a sheet in front of us and we had a cape behind us. That's a little bit two-dimensional, but, garments are three-dimensional. So, weavers are really playing with this dimensionality, but the result or the goal isn't just, won't it be fun to weave? The goal is, let's create something that's separate from weaving. And the person has the practitioner has an account to give by which it provides the things it provides, an account of what their nature is so that it can say the cause of each, and seeks the welfare of its object. That's another really strong point. That's part of the technique. So, episteme or episteme is the Greek word most often translated as knowledge, but it's theoretical knowledge. We have I can't even read this, but you can on my blog. So there's different types of knowledge, basically. So technique is about practical knowledge, or knowledge in practice. So
technique that is informed by knowledge of forms. Plato's really interested in the idea of forms, the form of the good, which is one of his big themes. In the Republic, this knowledge is the indispensable basis for the philosopher's craft of ruling in the city. The idea that virtue is a type of technique or craft of life, one that is based on an understanding of the universe. Also, piloting a ship is one of these techniques, according to Plato. And also shipbuilding is considered a technique by Plato. He uses the notion as a way of explicating central themes such as virtue, ruling, and the creation of the cosmos. As a consequence, he develops a complex account of technique. First of all, craft has a function, ergon. This is what it characteristically does or what it characteristically accomplishes. While the ergon of a craft is its goal, the goal is frequently identified as a result separate from the activity of the craft. The theoretical aspect is also expressed as articulate reasoning about the goal. In Plato's view, the ability to explain why he does what he does is one of the most important characteristics of craft. So, in one of his writings, Charmides, he's talking about, he distinguishes between two types of physicians. So the physician that has this practical knowledge that is actually working with technique, the technique of medical care, versus somebody who perhaps cures somebody, but they don't know how they do it. That's not to say that it doesn't actually produce healing. It's just, it's differentiated here. So that the person who, brings about the type of healing for which they can't say, oh, well, this is what I did, and then I did this, and then this happened. That would not qualify as a technique. And couldn't qualify as technology. So just Plato has Socrates as his, one of his main characters. Socrates didn't do any writing, so as a student of Socrates, Plato utilizes Socrates as a character in his dialogues, and also as, since Plato taught Aristotle, that's one of the reasons why I'm so interested in Plato, in terms of his status as a philosopher and also the great things he says. Talking about the shipbuilding and piloting a ship, I've written papers talking about the trireme, which is those the ancient Greek warships that have 3 sets of oars on either side. I talk about what is the chain of command on a trireme, and in the ship of state metaphor, Plato talks about the kybernetes, which is the pilot of the ship. The pilot of the ship is a commander. Basically, they're the helmsman. They are the steersmen, so they're literally steering the ship. And then they're also the navigator. And really, the navigator is the most important part. And when Plato is talking about this technique of the ability to rule a city, or pilot a ship. He really goes to, you know, when he mentions the universe, you know, what the navigator is doing is the navigator is looking at the change of the seasons. They're looking at how the course that they're plotted relates to the changing environment. So as you plot a course and you move, let's say, through a sea, your environment is changing because you're moving. It means that your relationship to the stars are changing, your relation to the shoreline, if it's daytime, or other markers are changing. And that is, Kybernetes is where we get cyber words from. That's the basis of cybernetics. It's the basis of cyberspace. But the people who coined these cyber words were only looking at, they were basing it on the Kybernetes, K-Y-B-E-R, being the basis of C-Y-B-E-R, but each of these concepts is only looking at one or two roles out of the three roles of the Kybernetes. So I'm the first person to look at all of these three roles of the Kybernetes and incorporate them in the way that I look at cybernetics and cyborg. And cybernetics is just the study of feedback within systems. So that homeostasis that automatically keeps us alive and keeps us responding to things subconsciously is a feedback system. And that is what characterizes organisms. So all organisms are cybernetic. So the phrase cybernetic organism is it's redundant. It's a pleonasm. Through linguistics, I feel that people have this aversion towards redundancy. So, you know, when I say red chair, you would think, well, perhaps there are chairs that aren't red. Otherwise, why would he say red chair? So the phrase cybernetic organism has contributed to people thinking that something that is cybernetic is therefore not organic, which is not the case. So far then, a craft is defined by its goal and its kind of knowledge, and as a kind of knowledge. Fully develop this knowledge is knowing how to accomplish a goal on the basis of an understanding of the goal. The understanding can be articulated in an account. The account informs and guides the skilled practice, a craftsman being able to articulate the goal. And also, there's a second feature. Well, there's more than two features, but one of the final feature that is covered in this encyclopedia entry on how Plato interprets techne is the importance of a techne seeks the welfare of its object. A leader of a pilot of a ship, and by analogy, the leader of a city, that's what the ship of state metaphor by Plato is about, seeks the welfare of the city. You know, it's important for that practitioner to be able, like, for example, in the rule of a city, you know, part of this analogy is it's important that the legislator of the city should be able to explain to the citizens the reasons behind the laws. And, you know, that's vital to techne. That's vital to the logos of techne, and the techne logos, and technology. And thank you very much. And I'll I'd love to hear your questions. Maybe we could, if there's, are there any questions? Could we send him the wireless, please? Fantastic. Hold on a sec. And thank you for coming by and, you know, your attentiveness and your interest. And you can just tell me.
So with the surveillance surveillance you mentioned with like protest groups, monitoring police actions and human rights and all of that, have you found anything that is a good way to feed to not just like a live streaming site like a Ustream or something like that, but to a recorded, maybe mesh network thing in case network access is shut down by some means?
I'm not aware of the connection between like mesh networking, but I'm really interested in that capability because you know my you know like you said, something like Ustream, like for example, if you know if I'm taking this device and I'm using GSM protocols to stream the video to a server, or even if I was using like traditional like Wi-Fi, like 802.11. So my understanding of how that those networks are traditionally set up is more like multiple clients talking to like a more like of a centralized host. There are things like Zigbee. So Zigbee is it's basically a class of embedded radios for doing things like wireless serial. So you know, let's say I wanted to create a remote control robot. You know, I have the option of using something like Wi-Fi, like 802.11, just to like you know, probably using like TCP, saying like, hey, like I want some information. Okay, like here's the information. You got it? Yeah, I got it. That's not a mesh protocol, but Zigbee does utilize some 802 point close. So there's a couple of different frequencies that Zigbees operate on. So basically, they're used to do basically like wireless serial communication, for example, which you know isn't a network protocol. So basically, what you're doing is, but they are capable of mesh networking. So my understanding of what that does is it's bringing serial into a networking protocol, which is a mesh protocol. As different radios, as they develop like Zigbee over different radios, and they move closer to the band of what like Wi-Fi is. It's not because they're moving towards that band that they're basically Zigbee is mesh, and Zigbee is moving towards Wi-Fi bands. And then you have Wi-Fi, which is like more like client server based, because even though like we have all of these I mean these can act as servers, but I mean the upload speed is obviously way less than the download speed. That's just usually how it is. People aren't expecting people to basically run a server off their mobile device. And, I mean, when you have like a hotspot, this is actually a GSM to Wi-Fi, or, this same thing, GSM to Wi-Fi, you're basically, like creating a node, but, it's not like, this is like I mean, you could create like a small cloud, but basically, when we're intercommunicating through our mobile devices, we're really talking to, like, basically, data centers, and then the data center is talking to whoever we want to talk to. So we're not really, it's not a mesh network. We're really talking through that main hub. So not that I know of, but yeah, I'm super interested in the ability to do that type of thing through mesh networking. People are creating mesh networks that are capable of bandwidth that would be appropriate to streaming media, and mesh networks are really exciting in their ability to pass along signals to another node in the mesh, and I think, do you know much about mesh networking? Okay, so does mesh networking include like the ability to basically reroute a signal? Okay, so and I mean I guess that's that's one of the things that that TCP IP style protocol does is capable of, like, well, I mean, that was the whole idea behind ARPANET is, well, this this base got blown up, so we can like automatically reroute the signal through another base to get to where we need it to go. So I think it has some of that capability. So I think that's something that's shared with the amongst those network styles. Yeah, but if you find one, leave a reply, and I'll build this into the into the outline that I'm putting together. Thanks. Other questions? Comments? All righty. Thank you guys so much. You're a great audience.